Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Joining me down there in Tequila, Georgia, my good friend, fellow University of North Georgia alumni, and host of the Georgia Voice of College Football. It's Matt Green. Matt, good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening, sir. It is good to be back with you. An excellent weekend of March Madness, and this doesn't bring me any pleasure, sir. I know it's been a long day for the Thomas household, but it's a tradition in my betting world that when one of my tickets loses, I have to rip the slip. So I think I have to. Do I have to do this right now?
Wow.
Tennessee Vols. They let me down. Put some money on them. They're not a Final Four school, sir. I'm sorry. That's just what it is.
I'll say, the bad luck for Tennessee the last 2 years. So they go back-to-back Elite Eights, 3 straight Sweet 16s. Last year, I think Tennessee was the third best team in the country, and they got saddled with Purdue, who was the second best team in the country in their region. So Tennessee got kind of screwed there. And they make to Elite Eight. I think Purdue and UConn were the two teams Tennessee could not beat last year. Everybody else, they could have beaten with Dalton Connect and everybody else. This year, I think they were probably the 7th or 8th best team in the country, somewhere in that, maybe 6th, 5th, if you're really, you could talk me into it. I think it's pretty close between 5 to 8, but they were not in the top 4. And you run into the number 1 seed in the Elite Eight this time in back-to-back years. You lose to the number 1 overall seed, or the number 1 seed in your region in back-to-back years. But it's Houston was a better version of Tennessee. They were better in defense and better in offense, only slightly. Tennessee was number 3 in defense. Houston was number 1 in defense, and it was just they were the better team. There was no way around it. Tennessee had a terrible start to the game, and they just dug themselves a hole they couldn't dig out of. But there's no shame in what Tennessee has done the last 2 years. I think Rick Barnes maximized where this team could go. They needed some luck though. In both years, winning championships requires some luck. You need some things to go your way in the bracket. And if you're not the number 1 overall seed, if you're not UConn the last 2 years, or you're not Duke this year, you do need some luck to go your way. And if Purdue beats Houston or something, this year's Purdue team, I don't think would have beaten Tennessee this year. And then Tennessee's in the Final Four, but then you're still running into the number 1 team in Duke the next round. And I don't think Tennessee would have matched up well with Cooper Flagg and company in that one either. But I just think you needed some luck. But they're you made Sweet 16, Elite 8, Elite 8. That is an awesome 3-year run. And this tournament is one of the hardest, if not the hardest, to win in all of college sports. I think this kind of tournament is just so stinking hard. And it just sucks because I think it was a tough way to go out because you were just kind of dominated for a lot of this game. And the first half was just so bad. You fought hard in the second half to try and make it a game. And you kind of got back into a 10, 11-point game late, but just not enough juice down the stretch. You hate it for Zakai. You hate it for Jemai, 4-year guys who were just the epitome of Tennessee basketball. But the Rick Barnes jokes, I just don't get. Where I'm the dude, 3 straight Sweet 16s, 2 straight Elite 8s, and he lost to number 1 seeds in back-to-back years. I think Rick Barnes got every last ounce of these last 2 teams. He just ran into buzzsaws at the very end. I don't think these are bad losses. And I think anyone who's they choke right here, I'm it's not like they lost to a 12 seed, a Cinderella, to get to the Final Four. It's they lost to both years teams that were seeded higher than them. They did everything they were supposed to do. And this is a chalk Final Four. All 4 number 1 seeds made it to the Final Four. So I'm just look, it sucks, but Tennessee had a great year. They've had a great 3-year run. I think they'll be really good and right back here next year. They're going to reload strong. They have some exciting young guys. But it's just, I don't know. I think it's fine. I think they had a great run and another great year.
But you're saying you don't understand the Rick Barnes stuff because
especially the last 3 years.
It's Twitter. This is the ecosystem that we're in the sports discourse now. If you don't win at all, you suck, and you haven't won anything. It's Rick Barnes is one of the best coaches in college basketball, but that's going to hang over his head as he still doesn't have a national championship. He's not part of that club. Tennessee wants to be in that club, and they're just short of it. They're just one of the top 10 programs in the country, probably the last 5 years or so. But they haven't gone to a Final Four, they haven't won a national championship. And in this just kind of dumbed down sports argument world we live in, they suck, and you have people, myself included, because this is what's going on, trolling a team that got like four rounds further in the tournament, because this is what sports fans do. So it is what it is. I mean, this Rick Barnes, it's funny. Most people, I guess a lot of people might hear it as an insult when I call Rick Barnes the Mark Richt of college basketball, but that's how I feel. Like, I think Mark Richt just didn't win a national championship. I don't think it was Mark Richt wasn't capable. I think he just, things have to bounce your way sometimes. You get close and whatever, you run into certain teams, certain years, things like that, just bad luck. Or the timing of your really good season was when there was other really good teams or something like that. So I think Mark Richt was an elite coach at Georgia. And I think, Rick Barnes has been an elite coach at Texas and at Tennessee. And it is what it is. He's going to still hear this storyline until it's not a storyline.
The Mark Richt thing, it's like if Aaron Murray gets in there and they get Notre Dame in the national title, I think Georgia wins the national title that year.
Yeah, you spike the ball and you got second and goal from the 8-9 with like 10 seconds left. Like, who knows what could happen?
Like, you're beating that Notre Dame team most likely in the national championship.
Yeah, I'm sure. That's why I feel like the 2007 Georgia team, by the end of the year, that was the best team in the country for my money. But you tripped up a couple times early, and you couldn't get a loss for Tennessee down the stretch, and you couldn't get in the SEC championship. But yeah, I mean, there's just
luck, and that's the point. It's like you just need some luck. I mean, Auburn went undefeated in the early 2000s with Jason Campbell. It didn't get a share of a national title. Like, that team's forgotten about
Tommy
forever.
Tuberville's not a national championship winning coach, and he had an undefeated team in the SEC. That's one of the best teams I've ever seen. Like, as far as in my SEC fandom, like 2004 Auburn is definitely up there.
And that's something you just lost forever. It's like you would never associate Tommy Tuberville as a national championship winning coach, but that 2004 team happened. Like, they went. Can you imagine?
He's much more of a championship winning coach than Gene Chizik. Honestly, he's a way better coach than Chizik.
But it's just, you just need luck, and that's the broader point here. Is like, the one thing that bothers me is the choking stuff, where it's like Tennessee did not choke. Like, there was no, like, that did not happen, and that has not happened since, I guess, the 4 years ago against Michigan in the second round, Zakai's first year with Kennedy Chandler and company. But I mean, even still, that was a good Michigan team. I mean, it's just, I just think it's a good season. It's great, but this is the hardest tournament to win. Like, this is the hardest one to win. And it's also like, this was a chalk tournament, and the 4 number 1 seeds made it to the Final Four. Like, I don't know. Like, what is anyone getting on to Bama like this? Bama made the Final Four last year, and they got beat by Duke and by a better Duke team over the weekend. It's like, hey, that just happens. Like, Alabama's one of the 10 best programs. Tennessee's one of the 10 best programs, and we'll see what the pinballs look like next year. It's like, that's what you want to be. You want to be in the high end group of the pinballs, and then hope that things break your way, and you get that one special run. But like, it's hard, man.
Getting to a Final Four makes it a little bit different. So Nate Oates has that, that Rick Barnes doesn't. Well, at least in his time.
Like, Texas Tech choked, right? We can say Texas Tech choked against Florida. Like, that was a choke job down the stretch.
But see, I don't even like that. I mean, Florida started hitting some ridiculous shots and ended up winning the game. It's like, it's how we like kind of talk about sports. It feels like more these days, because I saw the tweet at halftime of Tennessee Houston that Tennessee was the fewest points ever scored by a 1 or 2 seed in the first half of a tournament. Why don't we say Houston held a team to a 1 or 2 seed to the fewest points ever in the first half, because Houston's defense was getting after it. Like,
I mean, they're the number 1 defense in the country.
Yeah, like, Houston's playing some great defense. It doesn't have to be because Tennessee choked it. So, it kind of is what it is, but you can I choose to be positive, and I look at the positivity of Houston's defense was just how hard Houston plays too. Like, they are 40 minutes of hell for sure. They just get after it.
I agree, Matt Green. Well, let's dive into our dog bites and ball conversation here on A Pod Divided, where we talk all things Georgia and Tennessee to start things off here. Matt Green, before we get into some fun college football topics here today, I thought this would be fun for both of Tennessee and Georgia's perspective, because I think there's like it's kind of funny, but I feel like there's oftentimes more hand-wringing and controversy and fan complaints for assistant coaches than head coaches for a lot of SEC programs. I mean, think about the third and Grantham, think about Bobo, think about so many different guys over the years. Jim Chaney, James Coley. For you, I'm just like, you go up and down the list, and where it's like, Mark Richt kind of avoid a lot of them. I mean, Brian Schottenheimer, obviously, that final year. You just go up and down the list. A lot of assistant coaches, I feel like, are more controversial and more picked on by fan bases than the head coach is oftentimes. And I do think it's on the positive side who we value or who we think is the most valuable person on the staff. As staffs grow in Tennessee and Georgia, I think both have top 10 programs right now. Both staffs, I think, are really good. I think Georgia is better overall. But I do think both have strong staffs and are kind of unique in different ways because, I mean, on the Tennessee side, we'll get into Georgia stuff. It's like Tennessee's offensive side is all young guys. It's all guys under 40, whether it's Darrell Sims, Kelsey Pope, who Georgia tried to hire a couple years ago at wide receiver coach. You have Alec Ablin at tight ends coach. Glenn Ellerby is the lone over 40 offensive assistant, and he coaches offensive line. And then Joey Halsey, obviously quarterbacks and OC. And then defensive sides like William Inge, veteran DC. You have Rodney Gardner, veteran defensive line coach. Willie Martinez, you know well, veteran cornerbacks coach. Tim Banks. Like, you just go down the list. Like, that side of the ball is all vets. So it's just really interesting how staffs how coaches put together their staffs. And I know less about the Georgia side of things here, Matt Green, but I do think it's interesting when you kind of like, if you had to pinpoint who the most important person, because that's another part of it, is like Chip Kelly was the most important, I think, offseason addition for Ohio State to win a national title a year ago. Like, if you don't hire Chip Kelly, I don't know if this all works. I don't know if you win a national title. Assistants matter in a major, major way. Like Todd Monken, an all-time important assistant at the University of Georgia. That's not to say that Kirby never would have won one, but Tom Monken was the best play caller in the sport for multiple years. And I think that played a big role, along with the big-time defense. So with all that being said, Matt Green, when you look at the current Georgia coaching staff, who do you think right now is the most valuable assistant coach at Georgia under Kirby Smart?
Yeah, so when I started thinking about this, and you kind of started alluding to the Mark Richt thing, and there wasn't a lot, because a lot of those OC, there's a lot of different OC names you just named there. And with Mark Richt, first 4 or 5 years at Georgia, he was the OC, the play caller. So, and then it went to Bobo. It was basically Bobo until the final year of Mark Richt, when Schottenheimer took over, and maybe that was the end of Richt, but maybe the writing was already on the wall. But yeah, I mean, Mike Bobo, that's the only assistant I'm thinking of off the top of my head that became a head coach under Mark Richt. Like, it's like there's a different problem that Kirby Smart has had on his staff. It's because he's producing so many damn head coaches from his staff that he's having to keep churning them over, So you look at specifically on the offensive side, just feels like, the most important coordinator for Kirby, since he is a defensive minded guy. So like Bobo is always going to be like, one of the most important, like in terms of his success is going to go a long way in determining the team success. But they're the two coaches that you really can't match what they've done on the recruiting trail, and just terms of continuing to have elite players at that position every year, are Glenn Schumann and Todd Hartley. Like, Georgia's linebacker room is just absurd. And it's been absurd for like 6-7 years in a row now, that it's like there's multiple NFL linebackers on every single starting defense. It seems like it's insane. And I think this 2025 team is going to be no different. That's one of the things I'm getting most excited about, reading some of the spring intel and stuff like that, is that this inside linebacker room, there's question about like what Georgia's going to do at edge and everything like that. I think they just have so many dudes at linebacker. They're going to figure out how to get them on the field, whether it's CJ Allen, Raylan Wilson, the older guys, the third-year players now coming in this year. But everything you hear, every single spring update is about Justin Williams and Chris Cole, the sophomores that kind of made some noise last year. So I think that room is just going to be so full of just playmakers. You remember how in 2021, after Adam Anderson got injured, Georgia didn't have that kind of great pass rusher on that defense. And they just played Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker, and Channing Tyndall all together, and they figured out how to get after the quarterback. And Channing Tyndall was great at that. So I think that's one thing that Georgia kind of prides themselves in that linebacker room is getting those versatile guys that can rush the passer too. So I feel like Glenn Schumann, even though Kirby is obviously like the guy on defense, there's not a position that has just consistently performed at an elite level like Georgia's inside linebacker room.
That's interesting. I mean, I think, they're just kind of loaded. I mean, Justin Williams seems like the next dude there, and then we'll see if they get involved. Like, I think they're going to take a transfer at edge just because of that Damon Wilson part of it, where I don't know. Like, because I think didn't they move someone on the inside to edge this spring to kind of fill the void? I think one of the linebackers got moved over.
Chris Jones, I think is the guy who was he an NC State transfer? I might be confusing that with somebody else, but I think he was an inside linebacker. They moved to outside. I think that I don't know how to pronounce his name. Darren, like Ikenbago or something like that. He's got a long name like that. It starts with an IK something. But that dude is I think a redshirt freshman or a sophomore coming in this year. Like that's been creating some noise. But Quintavious Johnson is the one that a lot of people have been hyping up. He played quarterback in high school. I want to say he went to Mays, if I'm not mistaken, but he played quarterback in high school. He's like 6'4", 250, 260, and he's a beast. So, I mean, Georgia has recruited big time, so there's a chance they have enough guys without having to go to the portal. But I think it was a guy from like South Dakota, North Dakota or something, big time edge rusher that might be hitting the portal or something like that. I think Georgia was linked to him a while back.
He ended up in Kentucky, I think.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah. I think if it's who I think you're talking about, I think he ended up in Kentucky. But the Stanford kid just entered the portal because Stanford just fired Troy Taylor last week, their head coach here in the spring. So, and I'd forgotten that Lance Leipold got hired under similar circumstances with Les Miles at Kansas a couple years ago. So you can find a great coach even this late in the process. It's not ideal, but we'll get into that here in a bit. But I don't know. I think that's an interesting one. I'll say on the Tennessee side of things, because I kind of was going back and forth on who right now is the most valuable, because like you could make the case in some ways that it's just so funny, because I think Glenn Ellerbe has not developed anyone in-house yet, like any of his guys, but he turned Darnell Wright into a top 10 offensive tackle, a NFL draft pick 2 years ago. Tennessee has been able to run the ball for 5 yards a carry, year in, year out, under Josh Heupel in 4 years. He just had Dylan Sampson, who was maybe the best running back in college football this year, not named Ashton Jeanty. You have an offensive line that doesn't ever really have a sack problem. They're able to patch it all together most weeks, even if things like last year where you're just banged up at right tackle with John Campbell and Dane Davis. Like, he's been able to do it with JUCO kids. He's been able to do it with transfers. Like, I think two things can be true with Glenn Ellerbe, where I think and this year is a big one. Like, you have to start developing some of these in-house blue chip guys that you're signing. And they, like, at some point you can't just rely on transfers or old Jeremy Pruitt guys. And this year he's going to have 2 new starters who are going to be him, his own guys at center and at right tackle. But I think he's still done a good job. Like, Tennessee's offensive line and running game has been good all 4 years. And I think there is a cohesion between Ellerbe and Heupel that I think has kind of gotten too overlooked by fans, because he hasn't developed anyone in-house yet in terms of the guys he's signing out of high school. But it can't be him just because of that, because I'm like, you got to develop him. David Sanders at right tackle this year will be huge, and hopefully William Satterwhite and or Max Anderson at center. If they come through, then
I would say they are developing them. They just, maybe Tennessee's not getting the elite blue chip offensive linemen, but if they're having run games that are this good each year, I think that speaks to the development. But actually recruiting to the big time level and getting a David Sanders, that's the next step, which they appear to be taking.
But with all that being said, I still think it's Rodney Garner. like Rodney Garner, and I want to do a caveat where it's like Rodney Garner and Chop, because Chop has been an analyst for the last couple of years, and now Eckler just left for the special teams job at Nebraska. He went back home there, and Chop just got elevated to the outside linebackers coach. But that's been Tennessee's best position room for 4 straight years. Like, it's been the Leos, it's been James Pierce, Byron Young, Omar Norman Lott, Matthew Butler. It's been just guy after guy. Tyler Barron before he transferred this past year. It has to be Rodney Garner. Like, Rodney Garner, it doesn't matter how many years pass. Like, he is just so good. And this is still a trenches sport. And Tennessee has won games because their defensive line has just wreaked havoc. Like the Texas A&M game and South Carolina game in 23, where the offense didn't have it, but the defensive line was so good and so overwhelming that it just didn't matter. Like, his development of James Pierce was gigantic. His development of Byron Young, who came out of nowhere and is now a consistent player for the Rams, that's an all-time great story. But it's just, he has been so good at identifying talent and developing talent across the board. It's just like, I don't have to ever think about what Tennessee's defensive line is going to look like under Rodney Garner. Like, he wakes up and it's just, here's another, he wakes up and it's like, all right, how can I develop this next 4-star into a NFL guy in a couple years? And he rotates 13 guys. Like, he does everything well, where he keeps the veterans happy. He gets the young guys who you bring in some much needed snaps. He's just elite. Like, Rodney Garner is the best of the best when it comes to defensive line coaches. And I just think Tennessee's really in a good spot in a lot of position rooms right now on the coaching staff front, especially on the defensive side. But I can't say enough positives about Rodney Garner. It's just, the answer is Rodney until another position group really breaks out consistently, because that guy, it just doesn't matter what he loses or what that room looks like year to year. The guy he identifies talent really well. He develops talent really well. He handles the veterans really well. And Tennessee is one of the best defensive lines every year because of Rodney Garner. And I think it's the only unit you can count on to be elite in the SEC year in, year out with this team right now.
Yeah, that's a good call. Rodney Garner is just, through the years, wherever he goes, they just produce great defensive linemen. So I definitely can't disagree with that.
All right, sir. Well, that was fun. Here with some off-season Tennessee and Georgia content. Let's dive into our weekly segment. We didn't do this last week because we had a long show going, and y'all can check back into last week's episode here on A Pod Divided on the YouTube channel or wherever your podcast, where we dove into our top 25 current CFB head coaches, where we stand on them going into the 2025 season, Matt Green. But what do you have for us this week on Matt's Minute?
So I'm not going to get too back into basketball here, but this is what made me think of it. So we have the 4 number 1 seeds, as you alluded to earlier, in the Final Four, first time since 2008. But I think that's the important part, is that this has happened before, and you're seeing a lot of overreaction of just like, oh, the portal NIL, this is the death of the small schools. They can't compete anymore. It's like, look, all the number 1 seeds are winning. And it's like, yeah, there was fewer upsets this year, but didn't they set like a record for first round upsets last year? Like, it's kind of ebbs and flows, 2008, senior of high school, SB08. That's the one I remember. Mario Chalmers. It's a vivid memory of my sports watching career, being in Panama City, watching Mario Chalmers hit that shot against Memphis to win the national championship.
Did you hit Club La Vela as a post game celebration?
Great name drop right there. But it got me thinking, like, the biggest issue I have with the transfer portal and the NIL is that it happened at the same time. Like, does the NCAA, did they learn nothing from the scientific method? You got to have your controlled variables and your manipulated variables. Like, I have no idea. I mean, I have an idea because I have theories and we're going to talk about it. But we really don't know, like, what is the thing that, like, kind of changed college sports? Like, what's off the top of your head, if you had to pick portal or NIL, which is the one that's, like, kind of turned the sport upside down? Which would you say?
Oh, portal, no question.
You think the portal?
NIL's existed long before NIL has publicly existed.
That's fair, because, like, with the NIL, like, the big money schools are already going to be at an advantage. Yeah. But I mean, that's always been the case. The big money schools have always been at an advantage, but you at least had to, spend the money right. You had to, evaluate the right high schoolers, all that recruit and everything, the portal definitely lessens the impact of recruiting. And then with the portal, like the pro sports have contracts, like you can't just be a free agent every year. Like you saw Silas Demery jump in the portal, and then people were talking about, oh, why is he jump? George's building something. Why is he jump? What does he not like? What's going on? It's like, no, it has nothing to do with that. It's just like someone who, it's like companies used to have pensions and people would stay with them for 30 years, get a gold watch. Now it's like, you got to look out for yourself, jump to the next company, make a little bit more. It's like, if those tools are there for you and you can go to the NBA combine, work out in front of some scouts, it's essentially like a summer internship or something with a big firm you're trying to get a job with after college. You got some exposure. Like, okay, they see you. Maybe you're with a second round pick. Maybe you should go back to college. You can make some more money while in college, maximize your earnings. And then maybe you can't play in the NBA. And so the college is when you have to make the most. And it's not, oh, he just doesn't love Georgia. I guess he just doesn't love Georgia as much as some other guys love Georgia. It's like, unfortunately, that's what it is. Like, and I can't blame recruits for doing what they're doing, or blame current players for doing what they're doing. And I think the biggest thing that's coming down to all of this, like the most intangible reason why the portal is the biggest, because I felt like the exceptions were great. Like, having an exception for graduates to transfer, like I thought that was a great, like this is literally college sports. You got a degree. That's the whole reason we're doing this. You can go somewhere without sitting. But I feel like there should have been no appeals at all. Like even if it's a sick grandfather, whatever, it sucks. These are the rules. Because once you open it up a little bit, I kind of think that was the downfall. Because oh, well, they hired my dad as an assistant coach, so now I can transfer immediately or something. Or my coach was fired, so now I have to go. Maybe some exceptions. But you heard stories about, you remember Luke Ford, the transfer from Georgia to Illinois, that tight end, and his grandfather was sick or something. He had to sit out. They had denied his appeal. And I think his grandfather died that year and never actually saw him play in college. And it's that sounds terrible. But if those are just the rules, then it's those are the rules. There is no vilifying the NCAA. It's those are the rules. If you're going to transfer, you have to sit out a year. It felt like that would at least make it not free agency, because you're not going just for a monetary gain. If you are, maybe you're making that calculation that sitting out a year is worth it. But it's not like Ohio State's going to sit here like they did in 2024. Guys, we have a loaded roster, but we have a huge, opening at the quarterback position. Let's go snag Kansas State's quarterback. Boom, done. We're a national championship contender now. I feel like that's just something about that seems wrong. But I think the most important, intangible reason is there was a connection that college fans have that it's greater than what the connection that pro fans have. And it's they went to the university. They were recruited by all these other schools, and they had to choose Georgia over Auburn. They could have gone to Auburn if they wanted to, but they went to Georgia, and they sat around, they grew and became adults here and got their degree. Or even if they didn't get their degree, they spent those years there. They could have gone anywhere. They chose to come here. And it doesn't matter if you're a Philadelphia Eagle or a Buffalo Bill, you were always a Georgia Bulldog. No one's ever taken that away from you, which I think it's reasonable to think that the fans had a certain level of connection with the players, and now maybe they don't. Maybe that connection's fading away because, oh, he's here because we gave him the biggest NIL deal. Should I look at our current recruiting class, or should I just wait till see what's on the field? Because half those guys aren't going to end up here anyway. They're not going to play here. I feel like if that connection is lost, college sports loses the advantage that they had over pro sports. I think there was something different about college sports to pro sports. You understood that it was a business, and that it is what it is. I think that's what made so many people like college more than the pros, and not because the players are getting paid now. That's not it. The players deserve to get paid something. They should have had some sort of revenue share model a long time ago. But it's just this idea of free agency, not free agency, and hired guns, essentially. I think it just turns a lot of fans off.
Yeah, but I think when you if you look at just the big time, part of the reason that Ohio State just wanted that title is because they were really good at retaining their guys. Most of the guys, Will Howard was your transfer guy you brought in, but they still wanted to. I mean, they signed Kyle McCord to be the guy, like, but it just didn't work out, so they moved on and had to pivot. But that offensive line in-house, their receiving core all in-house. Caleb Downs, that was circumstantial because of a Saban retirement. Both edges on that team, obviously, in-house guys. So I think it just depends. Like I tell people this. I was talking to my dad about this over the weekend, where I was like, one of the things that I think is hard for fans to kind of come to terms with is that, like, I don't think it's really changed. Where I think 25 years ago, I think there are guys who were all about the university they went to. Like Peyton Manning goes to every game he can. Like Chris Lofton for Tennessee basketball is back all the time. Like there are Al Wilson comes back for games. Candace Parker obviously loves the University of Tennessee. I think it's a case by case basis where I think some people come to the university and it's just like a job. Like it's just like the university doesn't have a strong pull for them anymore. That's just where they played their sport that they were good at for a while, and they moved on. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like that, we all have had jobs like that or situations like that. But there are some who it does mean a lot for, and they got paid. You know what I mean? Like I think even in the NIL era, there are a lot of guys like that love. You can tell Gunnar Stockton loves the University of Georgia. There are guys on the University of Georgia,
I don't
right?
think it's
Well,
not
Brock
about the
Bowers,
player
Lad
loving
McConkey, they love it. Like you'll see
I don't
them
think
back.
it's about the player loving the school. It's about the fan base loving the players to the same extent that they always did, feeling like they went to the same school. Like that's a connection. We're
but think about it, like, but think about the Philly Dogs right now. There are so many. Your mom, like, is a Philadelphia Eagles fan because she still loves these guys and watches them on the Eagles, and she loves that the Eagles drafted all these Georgia players. Like there are a lot. I think my mom was like that. Like there are a lot of Georgia fans who have followed. You followed Matt Stafford to the Lions because you were a big Matt Stafford guy. So I think, I don't know. I don't think it's really changed all that much to me at the big schools because I think it's what it's always been. Like, and I mean, Josh Dobbs here for Tennessee loves it and is here all the time. You have Aaron Murray, loves the University of Georgia, does a lot for them. Keith Marshall.
But see, all the examples you have are before this system got turned over on its head. Like there's a lot.
Well, no, I'm saying right now. I mean, like for every Carson Beck, like Stetson Bennett and Gunnar Stockton sandwich him. And I think both those guys love the University of Georgia. I think, I don't know. I think there's a lot of guys like you just go up and down the list.
Stetson
I think
Bennett did transfer.
Right. But I mean, it was just, he's a Georgia kid. Like he grew up in I don't know. I think the mailman's a Georgia Bulldog fan. All that being said, like Dan Jackson, like I think he was a fan favorite. I think people loved the Dan Jackson story.
No, of course. Fans are still going to have the player, but I'm just saying, like, fans still love AD Mitchell. You know, he had a circumstantial thing that the reason why he transferred to Texas. So you don't necessarily hold it against him, like, oh, it's just money that the reason we lost him. But like, I'm not even poking, saying anything about Ohio State's title not being legitimate, other than the 2 regular season losses in the format. But that's a whole other conversation. But like Georgia, like Darian Kendrick, like Georgia had a weakness at corner in 2021, and they were able to just get a starter from Clemson, like just plug him into at corner. Like it's just, it only benefits, I think, the biggest teams, like the portal ultimately. And I just don't feel like that's great. Like the NIL, I think was inevitable, and these guys shouldn't be poor while producing on the field while the schools are making millions of dollars and these $100 million TV contracts are going on. So they shouldn't be poor. They should be making some money. But it's like the portal, I think, is what being able to just poach someone with money. Like, I think that changes everything, to be able to just immediately plug and play a proven starter from another school. That's only going to benefit the schools that have the most money. And, like you're seeing, Georgia is definitely a school that has that has a bunch of money, but in terms of basketball, they're not a prestigious program. And so they're in a position where if some of their guys play too well, they might get poached by another school. Severe Wheeler was playing for Kentucky a couple years ago. Who's the dude who plays for the Blazers now that went to Dayton? Dayton is a better basketball program than Georgia was. So now you're seeing Silas Demery. Maybe he ends up somewhere. So, it is what it is with the portal. I just think keeping that 1 year sitting out and then adding NIL, I don't think that would have turned the sport kind of upside down. And I think you can call people like boomers and stuff, when they don't like the change in the sport and everything. But I think there is something to like, there's a tangible connection that fans with college sports have that fans don't have with pro sports. Like, they're not moving the team. They're never going to move the Tennessee Volunteers out of Knoxville. Like, this is attached to the university. There's like something, it's more involved in the community than the Tennessee Titans will ever been. Like, literally the Tennessee Titans are a team from Houston, like it just is what it is. Like, pro sports are different. And I think if college loses that and it becomes, 25, 30 teams and it's just a pro model, I just don't think that's really what people want college sports to be.
I think that's fair. I will say, I think more than what college football and college sports needs more than anything is just things to settle down. I think people will adapt to rule changes. People adapted to the NLDH very quickly. They adapted to the time clock quickly. People will adapt, but you can't be changing so much year over year. I think that's the problem, is realignment happening too often, transfer portal changes happening too often, spring game changes now. Like, it's just, there's so much change over and over again. It just feels like we're always like waiting for the next shoe to drop in college sports, where like, that's what it needs to stop more than anything. We need to get to that final point. And I think Josh Pate talks about that in his show. It's just like, let's just get like fast forward to this final beat, whatever it is. And I mean, he's optimistic about like what that final form looks like. But I mean, even if you have qualms about that, I would still say it will feel better for everybody involved to just get to the end of this, to know like what it all is. Here are the rules. Here's who's involved. Here's who's not. This is how it's going to work. Let's move forward. And I think that's one of the main reasons the NFL is just, the NFL has their divisions. They are pretty normal. Like, they make fiddle with the kickoff rules and stuff like that. But by and large, every year, they know they have the perfect product. Like, they know that they're going to be the juggernaut, and they're like, why would we mess with this thing that just works? Like, we have free agency at this time. We have the NFL draft.
They've made changes too, but it's adding more games, adding more playoff
teams, but it's not stuff that like overwhelms the fans. Like, their fans aren't like, whoa, what is this? And they're not like, wait, hold on, Seattle's in the AFC North now? Why is Seattle
turning their draft? You're familiar with fantasy. You're not a big fantasy sports guy. We know they have the snake draft. Like, what if they just turn the draft into an auction draft? If there is no draft order, we're just bidding on players.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. It's like, college football just needs to settle, and college sports needs to settle down. And settling down, hopefully we'll see with the House settlement this next month and see what that looks like and see how much change there is in the summer. But I think that's what they need more than anything, because I think fans will, and what I would tell people is like, it's just a case-by-case basis with the players and everything else like that. It's just, there are a lot of guys still that love their university, just like there were 30 years ago, and there are some who it's just a job, like it was the case 30 years ago. I don't think it's just a case-by-case basis. And that goes for coaches too. Like, coaches are the same way. There are some coaches that like Rich Rod, who loves West Virginia. You can tell Kirby Smart loves the University of Georgia.
Rich Rod is an interesting first example, though. He left West Virginia.
Well, I'm just saying, like, he's back. Like, he's been there twice. Like, you go back twice. Like, I just think that he's a West Virginia guy originally. My broader point is, like, there's just some, like, you just know. Like, Mark Richt, there's obviously a soft spot for Miami. Like, he loves Miami, his school.
Does Petrino love Louisville, or is Louisville just the only people that like Petrino?
I don't know. I don't know what home is for Petrino. I mean, he had a lot of success at Arkansas too. I don't know. I think he's still pretty positive there. But either way, that's all I'm saying. It's like, there's just case by case basis, and it's still a fun sport, and I still can't wait for college football to return. And I just think it's going to be another great fun year. It's going to be good, but they need to get to that point where they just settled this all down. And I will say, it's easy for us to say as two fans and of schools that are not going to be adversely affected by wherever this goes. They're in the Habs category. So it's just, there's not a lot of worrying. There's no Washington State, Oregon State worry with these two schools. And it's just like, they're going to be fine. Like, I'm just not worried about where Tennessee and Georgia are going to be when all this is said and done. They're going to be still one of the preeminent powers in this college sports space.
No, that's fair, but I mean, there is still, reason to worry about the sport as a whole. If even if your school is not going to be one of the ones that's affected, I really don't know what the end game is. Like, is the end game AFC, NFC, Big Ten, and SEC, a northern conference and a southern conference? So we go back to, what is the Mason-Dixon line? Just all the schools they're south of that or something. Like, I don't know how they're going to do it, but I feel like the perfect model is to just have all the regional conferences, and I guess that's gone out the window. So that's my 2 cents, but yeah, we'll see what happens. And yeah, that was my original point. It just sucks that they did all the changes at the same time, so we really don't even know. Even if we wanted to press an undo button, like we wouldn't even know which is the one that really took things off the rails. I'm sure the presidents and stuff would get together and they'd be like, I think it's the paying the players. Let's stop paying the players. If it was up to them, I'm sure that would be the decision.
Yeah. All right, Matt Green, let's change gears here a little bit. We mentioned this at the top. Andrew Luck, new GM. If you didn't know, he is the general manager of the Arizona Cardinal, his alma mater, and they fired
Stanford Cardinal.
The Stanford Cardinal. What did I say?
You said Arizona Cardinal.
Oh, Arizona. Excuse me. We were talking NFL. The Stanford Cardinal. Excuse me. Big tree guy over there, Matt Green, and they fired Troy Taylor, who's only been there 2 years. It did not go well. He came in from Sacramento State, where he had a lot of success. I thought this was interesting from Bruce Feldman in The Athletic. He wrote about this, saying, quote, "The timing here is tricky for a program coming off 4 consecutive 3-9 seasons," which I didn't realize that they've been 3-9 for 4 straight years. With the last 2 campaigns coming under Taylor, Stanford hasn't won more than 4 games in a season in the previous 6 years. The Jim Harbaugh years were a long time ago, man, and even the early David Shaw years.
I was going to say David Shaw had multiple good years.
So what do you make of all of this, Matt Green, with Troy Taylor and where Stanford's at right now?
I don't know. I wonder about all of these schools and these former Pac-12 schools that just kind of got like split up among the other conferences. Like there's something like playing against teams on the Atlantic Coast as your competition isn't like a reason why like you can't be good. But I feel like there's something to like, I don't know, like you don't even know the Stanford games are happening. Like if you're somewhere on the West Coast, like if you heard Stanford is playing USC, you know Stanford's playing UCLA, like you hear about those games. Stanford's playing Oregon. Like when Stanford's playing Georgia Tech, are you even aware that's happening? Stanford Clemson? Like, I don't know. I think there's something to these programs being in like a really weird situation. And I don't know like what Stanford's like commitment is to, NIL and all that type of stuff. Like, are they really committed to being one of these teams? If that's what it takes to be a competitive program, like is Stanford even there anymore? Because it's like not like Harbaugh was like this break the bank hire or something. Like Harbaugh was an up and coming coach that did way better than they could have ever imagined. And David Shaw was kind of able to keep it going. And you're always going to be Stanford and have your academic standards and everything. I don't know. I just kind of question like not even the direction, but even the potential of what Stanford even can be. I know we just saw it good a few years ago, but as we've been talking about, things have changed a lot in this sport.
Yeah, and did you see the 2 names that have been linked? I've seen in different pieces on The Athletic and other spots, Matt Green. The 2 common ones I saw, I think Stuart Mandel listed them too.
I don't know. I haven't.
Ken Nehemiah Tololo, who's now the head coach at San Jose State, who had a good year. They're not running the triple like he did at Navy. They're running there's a nickname for it. Their OC, Stuntsman. He runs, it's not the fun and shoot, but it's something like that. It's the June Jones style, like a modern version of it at San Jose State, that's had a lot of success. And then Jeff Monken at Army, who's had a lot of success, and they're not really running a straight triple anymore. And he's been really good. I mean, they were in the playoff conversation this past year. So if you're like, that makes me wonder if they're going to try and like kind of moneyball it, where like, that's just one of those where those 2 guys have won at hard places. Cause I think that's why it makes sense, because both have lots of success at service academies. Now Ken is over there at San Jose State, and obviously a lot of West Coast ties and all that kind of stuff makes him a more natural fit, I guess, for that particular position. Like Monken made more sense like Wake Forest to me. Like that would have been an interesting hire for them if they had gone that direction after they fired Dave Clawson. But
he can keep all his black and gold polos.
That's true. That's also true. I don't know. It clearly, if those are the 2 most common names, that like this is a hard job. Like this is, I mean, obviously the circumstance is not great. But like we said at the top, Lance Leipold got hired by Kansas. Has been a slam dunk hire, coming in there late in the process, and he's been great. So I don't think you're going to get a big time name this late in the process, and maybe that's part of the reason that certain guys are popping up. But I mean, I think Monk or Ken would be solid there. They both make sense. But like you said, it's just that pro style stuff that they used to like with Shaw and Harbaugh. It's just like I don't think they have the bodies anymore. And just with where NIL and where this is, like I think you kind of have to have a gadgety type offense and a coach who understands the limitations with your academic restrictions and just where you are with NIL, this, that, and the other. Like, I don't know. I mean, I think both would be like, they wouldn't get a bunch of great headlines like, oh, look at Stanford. But like, if you told me Jeff Monken or Ken Niumatalolo were good at Stanford and won 8-9 games every couple years, or could maybe flirt with an ACC championship run every so often, I wouldn't be surprised. Like, I think they're both just really good, consistent coaches. And I think that's what Stanford needs with like this track record they're not. It's like they need to get back to like respectability. They need to get back on just some kind of winning path here because it's not good.
No, I think that's true. I worry if like people with knowledge are throwing those names out, to me that says like there's a certain level of commitment to Stanford and it's about academics and it's about this great university, and we want to find a coach that can kind of, lean into that and try to be, the whole being greater than the sum of the parts and all that stuff, and has experience with guys that have a very strict academic regimen and all that with being at the service academy. So to me, if that's where the direction you go, I think that kind of screams like Vanderbilt's not really trying, or Vanderbilt.
That's
Stanford,
a kind of, I mean, hey, same kind of thing where you bring in Jerry Kill and New Mexico State, where you're like, we're going to run this kind of gimmicky offense and win some games. But also the reality is like, we can't play like Notre Dame, which is what they were trying to do early on.
Vanderbilt and Georgia Tech, those kind of teams. And I think it kind of, and maybe both of those are kind of changing where they stand on their standards, So, if they go with the service academy route, Jeff Monken is probably one of the better coaches they can get. So it's hard to just say, oh, they're accepting that they're not a true contender or something. But I think it speaks to like they're not going to get in that NIL sort of. And maybe Jeff Monken's tired of being at Army and he wants to be somewhere where he can start paying players. And maybe I'm completely off, But I think it speaks to kind of what they really value, and it's not necessarily winning football games over everything.
We'll see what they do, but it is interesting. And it's also interesting, their biggest rival, Cal, is like they hired Ron Rivera as their GM. They bring in the 5-star quarterback, the lefty, who was at Oregon for a cup of coffee, and he's a true freshman starter. And it seems like they're getting serious about football. It's interesting that Cal, it seems like they're turning up their focus on football, which is interesting because it seems like Stanford is not. But why would you bring in Andrew Luck as your GM if you were not kind of serious? I don't know. It's all very interesting. Fair. I'm very interested to see what Stanford does here.
It's also, what does Andrew Luck know? Like, I mean, he was the guy when Harbaugh was there. So try to make it more like it was when Harbaugh was around. Like, I don't know, but it's like, it's just a completely different world, a completely different environment. Of college sports now, and then Stanford was from 2007 to like 2012 or something, however long Harbaugh was there.
Gary Danielson, Matt Green. We grew up with Gary and Vern on CBS, and he will be retiring after next year here on CBS. We know who his replacement's going to be. VFL Charles Davis, moving from NFL to college football. With Nessie on the CBS.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Charles Davis has done some college before though.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just like he's been primarily an NFL guy, and now he's going to college, and I think he'll do great. Like, super nice guy, and I think he's going to do really well in this spot. But I'm curious because you remember Vern. Like, Vern, this booth, more than any college football booth, I think, in our lifetime, has like I don't know if it was the same for you. Like we both grew up in G County, and obviously a lot of college football fans, and a lot of people had hot takes on Vern and Gary. I mean, the strongest Georgia memory I have of those two is dancing in the press box when Soldier Boy's playing for the Georgia blackout game against Auburn, and I think there was every SEC fan thought Gary Danielson hated their team. They thought he like they did not think Gary Danielson was for him. I think there was a lot of folks who thought he was for Florida or for Alabama during their glory years, and I think it was just that those teams were just really good. And he was talking about how these teams were very good,
how
and
good they were, how good those really good teams
I'm
were.
like, that's just kind of the reality. But Vern, people later were like, Vern was awesome. And I'm like, I seem to recall you were pretty adamantly opposed to Vern Lundquist back in his peak.
Me?
No, I'm talking about like just people who would complain about Vern. And I'm like, oh, suddenly you like Vern now that he's gone or he's retiring and everything else. And I'm like, I always thought Vern was solid. Like Vern was fun. Like at least you knew it was a big game. And
I have one take on Vern, and it's just, and I want to be ageist here, but it was just Vern was iconic. I think he just lasted like 4 or 5 years too long. Like I think he didn't know the names on the rosters like he once did, once he got to a certain age. But Vern was an icon.
Yeah. And I think Gary was too. I think Gary Danielson will always get an unfair view from SEC fans more so than Vern. But I thought Gary Danielson was good. Like I never understood the anger towards Gary Danielson by so many different SEC fan base. I don't know if you share that same sentiment, but it's why I ask you, do you think he was overly rated, underrated, or properly rated as the voice of the color analyst for SEC on CBS for so many years?
So I have a different take. I'm going to say none of the above on yours. You could probably fit my answer into one of your options, but the way I would word it is that he's the most overhated announcer of all time. And so maybe that he's underrated, but I don't even think he's underrated because I was not like a huge Gary Danielson fan. He was fine. I don't know how many of those color commentators I'm just like, yes, he's awesome. The guys are talking about the game. He was fine. That's why I feel like he's just so overhated. Like people really did seem to hate Gary Danielson. And like you're saying, every program in the SEC thought he hated their team at one time or another. But I think, sometimes you can be in the shadow of a giant. And I think Vern was just kind of iconic and Gary Danielson was his right-hand man. But no, he was good. Like I don't truly have any negative thoughts on Gary Danielson. I think he was just overhated. I think that's the best way I would describe it.
Who's the best college football booth in our lifetime, you think? Is it Gary and Vern or is it somebody else?
Oh man, that's a good question. Put me on the spot. Everyone loves Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt right now. They might be the best one right now. It's hard to not associate the game you're watching with the broadcaster. And Gary and Vern were just doing so many of these iconic games. Like these are like childhood memories to me. Brad Nessler and Todd Blackledge was a really good pairing for a while. But there's just so many of these iconic games. Like you're talking about the 2007 Auburn blackout. Like that was just that was an iconic moment for Georgia fans. But I remember there was a buddy of mine who, ironically enough, worked at the College Football Hall of Fame, didn't care at all about college football, did not know about the kick six. And so I pulled up a video of a kick six. I'm obviously not an Auburn fan. And as I'm pulling up the video, like I'm getting chills, like, cause I was like, this was an iconic moment. Like, it's awesome. You've never seen this before. This was like an all-time great moment, maybe the all-time greatest moment in college football history. Like you could make an argument there. But the fact that Vern Lundquist and Gary Danielson were on calls like that, I think that's just, you can't separate them from the games they were calling,
Maybe I'm always crazy, but I'll always say the Georgia play for the tip against Georgia is more improbable to me than Alabama not being prepared for Auburn to return.
It was definitely the more improbable, the luckier win.
Yeah.
But in terms of the magnitude of like,
it was
Alabama,
just a walk off. It's
in
Auburn.
Like number one versus number 3 or 4. Like decided who won the SEC West, who went to the SEC championship, and essentially who went to the national championship. The
Yeah.
stakes on that game were just absurd. On top of it being already, the most storied rivalry in the sport too. It's just like you can't match the kick six.
I mean, Nick Marshall
While
screwed that
Alabama's
up.
on like a 3 out of 4 year national championship run too, like it's just insane.
Yeah. It's just like if you run that play back 100 times, I don't know if that's a completion 2 times out of 100 against Auburn.
Just absurd. Dude didn't even know where the ball was. Just looked around and all of a sudden it's in his hand. Like it's insane.
Yeah. Well, Matt Green, let's change gear to the program report here. Who is trending up and trending down here when it comes to Mizzou? Do you think this is a program on the rise, or do you think they are trending down from where they were a season ago, sir?
So you know how there's like there's a term for it in like data, like the flattening of the curve or whatever. And it's like if you went back, like at one point being left-handed was like illegal or something, So there was just a year where it just became like skyrocketing the number of people that are left-handed, And then at some point it kind of flattened off because only a certain number of people are left-handed, and now they're allowed to be left-handed, right? I feel like Missouri is kind of there. Like, I don't think they're going up or down. It feels like Missouri's kind of flattening off of like, this is maybe if Eli Drinkwitz has elevated this program, this is kind of as good as it can get, is being preseason ranked every year and then kind of finishing ranked every year. Like, I think Missouri definitely seems to be one of these, clearly like with their state laws and stuff, trying to be competitive with NIL and stuff like that and recruiting. I think they're truly committed to like trying to be, a big time spender in college football. But I just don't know how good Missouri can truly be. And it feels like this is as good as it can be, that they're being talked about as a team that could make the playoff. It's like that feels like as good as Missouri football gets to me. So I'm going to say they're like flatlining, and not necessarily in a bad way. Flatlining is a bad term. But like they're kind of maxing out, plateauing, I should say, at like maybe they're a 9-10 win program. And that's pretty damn good for what they're doing in the SEC right now. It's also really hard to evaluate how good Missouri was last year, because I don't think they were a very good team last year, with just one of the weaker schedules in the whole conference. They ended up going 10-3, right, last year.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, I do not think that they were a 10-3 type of team. So part of me kind of questions where they're at, but I can't question like how much Eli Drinkwitz has clearly elevated the program to where you're now questioning a 10-win Missouri season as like, how good were they really? It's like, I don't know. They were missing bowl games a few years ago. So yeah, they'll take a week 10-3 where they're ranked number 18 or something over missing bowl games all day.
Yeah, I think they kind of peaked. Like, I think Eli is like, his personality like makes him less properly rated, I think, by fan bases, where I think Eli has won to a consistent degree. I think Eli Drinkwitz is one of the better coaches in the SEC. I know Tennessee fans aren't a fan, and I put that on what is it? I already forgot his what he said to Heupel at that handshake 2 years ago. Standing on business.
Standing on business, yeah.
So stuff like that just don't like. But he's won 21 games in the last 2 years.
But you don't like that as a Tennessee fan. I think a lot of people did like that about him. Like, especially since he like told the players he was going to say it, so he had to keep his word or something. I think some people appreciate his shit talk a little bit.
You know what I just realized? I didn't realize he was born in Norman, Oklahoma, McGreen. What if the Oklahoma job opens up next year? What if that's the move? He makes Eli makes a move over to Oklahoma. But it was they had one of the quietest 10-3s you'll see in sports, where like there was so much juice. Like they gave Georgia problems 2 years ago in Athens. Like that Cody Schrader, the running back's name, I think is what his name was 2 years ago. Yeah, he was really good. And Brady Cook obviously burst on the scene. Luther Burden had a down year this year. Williams Winery is gone after 1 year after signing the 5-star kid off the edge. They didn't have the same kind of juice this year. I don't know. It just feels like, and their schedule's still nice next year, so they could be right there at 9-3, 10-2 again. But it just doesn't feel like. I mean, were they
11-2 2022? Mm-hmm. We're at 10-3, 11-2 that year.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
So,
seemed like a legit 11-2 also.
yes. And you think like maybe they can get back to that, but now with Texas and Oklahoma in the conference, they went 11-2 before Texas and Oklahoma got here. I don't know. It's a hard read for me because Kirby Moore was a good hire and he rejuvenated that offense. He lost his big time DC last year to LSU and Blake Baker, so you understood why there was a little bit of a drop off there. But I don't know. It's just they're a hard read for me because I think they're on solid footing. Like I think they're going to be solid as long as Eli Drinkwitz is there. But I don't think like there's just not even any kind of feel of like, oh, they're close to a national title run. It's just weird to me, right? Like a team that's won 21 games in the last 2 years, there's no like juice to this program. It feels like from the outside, Matt Green. It's like I don't think it's a program that's in decline, but I also just don't feel like we're nearing like a jumping off point. Like they signed the backup quarterback at Penn State to be QB1 next year, but I'm like, I mean, you're losing Luther Burden here. I don't know. Like I have a hard like you're losing your tackle who's going to be a first round guy. Like I don't know. Like I could see a very solid 9-3, but it feels empty. Where like, yeah, Mizzou's good. They're solid. They're a good team, but like they're not great. They're not elite, but they were pretty close to elite 2 years ago. And I don't know if that's a 1 year blip, with just having the right guys at the right time. But I don't know. It's just Mizzou is a hard read for me. Like I think they're more like who would you say is more sustainable right now over the next couple of years? Mizzou if Eli stays or Shane Beamer if he stays at South Carolina? Who feels more sustainable to you?
I think I'd have to go with Drinkwitz and Missouri. I think being the second team in a state, I would always prefer to not be the number two school in a state. Like I know they've beaten Clemson 2 years in a row now.
Yeah.
But I feel like they're still number two in that state. I don't know because we might not. I think we're saying the same thing. But I don't know if we're giving Missouri enough credit for what Drinkwitz took over and like getting them to 10, 11 wins. Like you clearly have to say they're on the up. I just don't know how much higher it goes, but you still have to give him credit for like this program is way better than they were when he was hired back in 2020. So yeah. You did get Drew Lock like under Barry Odom. Like you had a guy who's like a potential first rounder. Like he led the league and led the nation in touchdown passes that year. Like Missouri has had some good years, and obviously that you go back to like the Chase Daniel years and Gary Pinkel.
Hold on, you're forgetting one. When they went to the SEC title game, James Franklin.
Yeah,
or not James Franklin. What was his name?
It was James Franklin. Yeah, he was hurt at one point, and then I think Matty Mock was the starter the other year, right? I don't think Franklin was a starter both years, but I could be wrong. But yeah, so they've obviously had some good teams, but Gary Pinkel is essentially the peak of what Missouri has ever been. I think these last two, looking at their history, these last two 10-win seasons, I think are the second and third 10-win seasons they've ever had when Gary Pinkel wasn't the head coach. So Gary Pinkel was the best Missouri's ever been. And maybe a commitment to playing big boy football. Maybe they are one of those teams, but I don't think we'll know in 2025, like just because we've talked about the schedule, like the 2024 and 2025, maybe they've at least elevated to a point of like a soft schedule means they're winning a lot of games. Like they weren't even at that point before Eli Drinkwitz arrived. So I think we have to say they're on an upswing, but I don't know how much higher it really gets. I don't think Eli Drinkwitz is ever going to win a national championship at Missouri. I don't think he's ever going to win an SEC championship
or like a deep playoff run.
Yeah, I mean, if maybe. I mean, that's probably
could they be Penn State of the SEC ever?
No, I don't think there's any chance of that. I mean, I think that's like Tennessee is looking like, if anyone's going to become the Penn State of the SEC, like, and that almost sounds like an insult, but it's like just putting yourself, getting yourself at bats, and you're eventually gonna hit one out. Like Tennessee seems like they're turning into that perennial top 10 program. Maybe they're not winning the SEC, but they don't have to get to the playoffs. So that feels like Missouri's best chance is a year where they're the fourth best team in the SEC. and they're able to make a run into the playoffs. Because I don't know, it's just hard to envision a team like Missouri winning the SEC, but also when you got a weak schedule, maybe this is the year they can win the SEC. I don't know, or they at least can get to the SEC championship.
It's kind of wild. I could see like a scenario where they win 40-ish games over 4 years and never even sniff a national title.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. What was the definition of not sniffing one? Because if you're winning 40 games in 4 years, like I think you're going to make a 12-team playoff.
I mean, sniff is in like they're in a scenario where it's like we look at it as like they have a number one offense, number one defense, or there's somewhere like the stats are right there where you're like, oh, not only do they have the wins, but they have the juice. They have like a Heisman type guy. They have I don't know. It just feels like they have enough where it feels like them getting in, they go win a national title. Like them.
Well, and if they do win 40 games in a 4-year period, it would be a 10 and a 9 win season the next 2 years. Yeah. And that's definitely not winning a national championship, winning 10 and 9 games. But I mean, if a Missouri team won 40 games in a 4-year period, like that's historic, like level of, that's probably the most winningest senior class they would ever have had. Like, I mean, that 2013 and 2014 SEC East championships, like those are sandwiched by 2 5-7 seasons before and after. Like the best one is that's probably Chase Daniel's whole career, right? Or at least most of it. 07 to 2010, you went 12 wins, 10 wins, 8 wins, 10 wins. That is exactly 40. So they'll need 41 if they want to beat that record of that 07 to 2010 senior class.
Well, that's all I've got tonight, Matt Green. Anything else you want to throw out here on tonight's episode of the show?
That's all I got, man. One day those Tennessee Volunteers, they'll know what it's like to go to a Final Four, but that day is not today.
Man, I'm just hoping the Braves get a win at some point. Like, could they score a run as a treat?
The Braves, offense is optional for the Braves. They might start 0-7. Who knows? They might go 0-162. That is not ruled out yet. I'm taking the over, but it's not off the board yet.
No.
It felt like a continuation of that
when they won the series. They won the World Series starting 0-4 2021.
Oh, is that right? Well, there you go. Maybe we'll win the World Series this year. But if you remember that Padres series from last year, like the Braves had no business getting in the playoffs. They were so injured. Like it was just terrible. It felt like just a continuation of that series, just getting dominated. Fernando Tatis I don't know. I remember the Rhys Hoskins won a couple years ago. Then the Fernando Tatis won last year. Like how many like just iconic home runs are going to be hit against the Braves in the playoffs? I'm getting kind of tired of it.
I just wanted to bring back the red bills on their away gray uniforms. Drives me nuts.
I haven't
been here for years.
I do like the all blue, but I think in the basic red or with the basic grays, I'm with you. I'm with you there.
That's all I want. Just give me that. Just that one. Just bring back the red bills. I don't know who I need to talk to do that, but I just miss it all the time. It drives me nuts.
It's better than those new eras. You saw the new era, the new eras they had that's got like every team's logo in the middle, but like it's spelled out, like the name spelled out behind the logo.
Oh, I think
some of them spelled different things because there's a letter in the middle. Yeah, those are the worst things I've ever seen.
What are we doing? Matt Green, always a pleasure, and I will talk to you next week.
Yes, sir.
All right, we're back here on the Chase Thomas podcast where I am now joined by a first timer. You don't have to wonder where this man coaches high school football here in East Tennessee based on the good folks who are watching us on YouTube right now. It's the head football coach of the Fulton Falcons. It's Justin Long. Justin, good evening, sir. How are you?
Doing well. How about you?
Pretty good. Has that like settled in now? You're like, I'm the Fulton head football coach. How long did it take for you to like, oh, I'm back. This is my show now.
Yeah, there's still some days, man, driving home where it's kind of surreal, honestly. But I definitely feel a little bit more comfortable now.
When you talk about like feeling more comfortable now, what was some of the hardest parts of transitioning back to Fulton and taking over this prestigious program that has had some big time highs in the 21st century and just kind of getting it back to what we saw here a little over a decade ago?
One of the hardest things, man, was just getting everybody rowing in the same direction. I think everybody wanted the same thing, but getting everybody aligned, getting everybody speaking the same language, getting everybody in the right mental mindset definitely was difficult because you had to carry water and chop wood every day.
So when you say that, what do you mean? Carry water and chop wood every day?
I think you just have to be locked into the most minute details, and
Mm.
you have to really, try to get to know the guys. One thing I thought was important for me was to start having one-on-one meetings. So we had one-on-one meetings with the guys. I'm asking them everything from how long you've been playing football to your favorite subject to who do you live with at home. So I really tried to get to know them because I knew there was going to be days when I had to get on them, and I wanted to have that relationship already established.
When you talk about the minute details and things like that, have you always been a natural at that? And going back to your playing days and everything else, is just that's always come natural, or is that something you had to work on as you got older?
It was way more natural as a player.
Hmm.
My years as a coach, I couldn't get whatever was in my brain communicate effectively to the kids. So those first 2 years, I spent a lot of time just watching. I was blessed to be around some really good coaches and some really good men. So, man, it really took maybe 2 to 3 years to learn how to communicate what I wanted them to do.
The off season's interesting because I know different coaches focus on different things, clinics. There's all kinds of, you can always be learning. There's always different, everybody has their own different way of going about it. How have you approached the off season program at Fulton? Is it just emphasizing like kids doing different things with obviously Fulton basketball being a juggernaut here in East Tennessee, just staying involved and staying active? Is it like, how do you approach the off season for your guys?
Yeah, I'm 100% in support of guys playing other sports. We got guys running track, playing basketball, playing baseball. I definitely think that's important. For me personally, it's always trying to find, one more piece of information that can get us over the hump. I've met with a few coaches. I've been to, a few clinics, and still plan to do a few more.
Mm.
And you're something that just flip your whole program upside down. You're just looking for a few things that can really sharpen your axe and get you where you need to be. So for me, it's about that. It's about that for the coaches as well. My one-on-one meetings with the coaches, I challenge them to, hey man, let's take something that we didn't do great last year, and let's try to learn a little bit and get better. I think that's the name of the game. You never arrive. You're never at a place where you can be complacent. So yeah, just always trying to get better.
What's one thing you've circled from last year that you think you need to get better at, and you think you feel pretty good that you're gonna be able to clean up in 25?
I mean, honestly, Chase, I think for me, it's just blocking and tackling. How can we be better blockers and tacklers? That starts in the weight room. Our defensive coordinator, Coach Brown, has done a phenomenal job in the weight room for us, just kind of setting the standard, building that culture. Um, I'd like us to be a little bit more dominant in the run game this year. I like us to be able to lean on people up front, and then just be more efficient. Let's get 4 yards on first down, and give ourselves a chance to move the stick. So, just in that basic way, I think everybody wants to run the ball a little bit, but we definitely want to be better at it this year.
Um, what's interesting about y'all season last year? You start off 1-3, and then you peel off five straight, and it started after the Anderson County game. Like, what clicked after the Anderson County game that kind of spurned this five game win streak?
Yeah, that particular night, it was just it was a lot of good energy, man. Everybody was pretty much focused, loose, but focused. We had a pretty good week of practice, coming off a tough loss. And those guys were really locked into what we were trying to do. They liked the game plan. I had guys texting me, during the week after practice saying, Coach, man, we think this is going to work. We think this is going to work. So Anderson County is a great program. They're obviously a state contender. So for us to be able to go out there and have the showing we did, what was very important. We were able to get our playmakers going, and it meant a lot to us. And the confidence that we pulled from that game was very key moving forward. After the game, I asked the guys, I said, what was different tonight? Like we didn't quit. We were down 14-0, could have rolled over. And I wanted to hear from the guys, mainly the guys playing. I said, what was different? And one guy raised his hand and he said, Coach, we didn't care about the name on the jersey. We just played to our standard. And that was just that was it in a nutshell. That's what we carried for the rest of the year.
I love that. What did you see though on film after that? Where it doesn't sound like you were surprised that y'all won 5 straight after that game.
No, I mean I think we really just kept it really simple. We tried to do plays that we practiced Monday through Thursday were the plays we Friday night. We didn't try to reinvent the wheel. We didn't try to, draw anything up in the dirt on the sideline. We just trusted our plan and we trusted our players. And that was able to contribute to the success we had.
What is one game? One of the things I'm always curious about is when you get into Thursday, a lot of coaches have a good feel on like how a game's going to go at this level. Like you've seen all the film and you have a good idea and certain matchups and how you're going to be able to handle it. Was there a game for you though, in particular in 24, that the game based on like what you saw on film just went very different than how you had anticipated? Was there one game in particular?
It went very different. So that's a really good question. Maybe our Elizabethan game, that first round playoff game, and the reason being, Elizabethan is a state contender every year. They are well coached. They have a chance to go make a deep run all the time. Well coached, big, physical, strong. Coach Whitten has done a phenomenal job, and we were limping going to that game. I think we maybe had 3 or 4 starters out on the defensive side, linebackers, safeties, D linemen, and we just weren't sure how we would be able to hold up defensively. And there are no moral victories. I don't necessarily believe in that, but we had a shot that night. They got it done, and they were able to pull through and move on to the next round, but. That was one where, I was like, man, our guys really showed up tonight in a way that maybe they weren't expected to.
Was there a player or a position group that was kind of like your tape hero, where like for the fans who were seeing on the outside, just cheering on the Falcons every week, that they might not have seen that you and your fellow coaches saw? Like you're just like, man, they've helped us tremendously this year, and it's not the stuff that's going to show up in the stat sheet.
100%. It would be our offensive line. 100. We had 2 pretty explosive players in Derek Smith and Al Johnson, and none of that happens without the guys up front. I think those guys really grew this year. Huge shout out to our offensive line coach, Coach Kyler Long, did a phenomenal job this year, just being consistent. Those guys. I don't think of an offensive line as 5 guys. I think of it as one unit. So guys grow each day, hearing the same thing every day. We really tried to coach to their strengths and call things that we think would help them be successful. I mean, I'm super proud of how those guys handled this past season.
I love that. What is the biggest adjustment you've had to make as a head coach from when you first got into coaching to now? What have you found is the biggest adjustment?
You mean from an assistant coach to a head coach, or
yes. Yes, as an assistant to a head coach.
Man, your phone rings a lot more. You get a few more emails too. I think Chase is just the decision making, man. Like knowing and carrying that where the final decision is going to be on you. I think sometimes you have to try to make the best decision for the greater good, which means sometimes you're not going to make everybody happy, and that's coaches and players alike. So you just got to try to keep, whatever your values are, you got to keep those in the forefront, and you got to make sure that your focus is on doing the best for the most. And I think that was difficult at first because maybe in the beginning I was trying to make everybody happy, and in a football program there's no such a thing, right? So I think just making sure you're trying to make sure your values are in the forefront of your program and that really you're the same guy every day.
That makes a lot of sense. What is there a position group battle that you're most excited by here in the spring and summer, that you're excited to see how it plays out and who grabs those spots?
Yeah, all of them.
Now that is a great CEO head coach answer there, Justin.
Seriously, we graduated a pretty big senior class. So there's a lot of positions open right now, and we want competition. Competition makes us all better. I want guys push. I don't want any guy to say, "Hey, I'm gonna wave the white flag. It's your job." No, I want guys competing every day, and we're trying to create that culture where you may if you beat me out, it's because you've earned it. It's not because I gave it to you.
Do you like the new playoff structure that's coming into the fold this year?
Yes, I haven't looked into it too much. We talked about it briefly as a staff, maybe right when it came out. But yeah, I mean, listen, if you're in the playoffs, I think you got a shot, but you
Yeah.
definitely want to good advantage. You definitely want to, try to do it that way.
As we wrap up here tonight, Justin, a couple non-football related questions for you. It's around spring break time. Justin Long is able to go wherever he wants to go for spring break. It's your call. Where are you going? Money is no object in this scenario.
Money is no object.
Money is no object.
This is going to be, and this is just the first thing that's coming to my mind. I'm going to go to Killeen, Texas. And I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
Killeen, Texas. I have an aunt that lives in Killeen, Texas. She's retired from the military. Shout out to my aunt Sharon. But very far from Texas A&M.
Okay.
And them is they currently have the Fulton colors, and they currently wear Adidas. So I just want to wear, watch practice, hang out, nerd out a little bit over the colors that I think are so pretty, and really just kick it with the Aggies, So that would be I'd go for like 3 or 4 days, kick it, and then get on back to the 865.
Wow. That is like, you are committed to ball here, Coach Long. Like there is no question with that kind of answer that you are absolutely in the right field. Like, no question.
I get to see family too, so yeah.
2 for 1. So you're not a beach guy, not a mountain guy. Like, you're like, I just want to go. Let me go check in on what's going on with Mike Elko's team. Like, that's where I'm gonna go.
I like the beach, Chase, but all beaches are the same, So if I were to go I would go out west somewhere where Colorado, Arizona. I'd go out west somewhere, try to see something a little different. We don't always get to see over here in the eastern part of the United States. So that's where I would go for something like that. But yeah, if you give me a chance to go nerd out with some football, I'll probably take that.
That's awesome. Final one for you. I'm curious, like with the off season, have you been able to catch up on some reading that you've wanted to do that you just don't have time for in the fall? Podcasts, audiobooks, or just what have you spent your time non-football related just here in this off season?
Yeah, it's hard sometimes, Chase, because you're always in planning mode this time of year. Non-football related is probably just any sort of, random audiobook in the car on the way to and from Fulton. Like I said, I've been listening to Carry Water. There's a book about being a dad. It's called Raising a Modern Day Knight that I really like. Talking about fathers and sons, so that's a pretty good book. So just I don't do a ton of reading, honestly. I'm more book sort of guy. I like when it talks to me when I'm just driving. So yeah, just and that's not like every day. That's probably maybe twice a week where I get a chance to do that. Because by the time you get home, you're ready to just wind down anyway. But not a ton of time away from football right now because we're a month away from spring practice.
I don't even have to ask you what you're watching. I just feel like you're watching You're watching ESPN 30 for 30. You're watching Friday Night Lights. I feel like the Justin Long household, I feel like there's sports on all the time.
Yeah, definitely. Even if it's in the background, for sure.
Final thing, I'll get you out of here, Justin. Do you have any game day rituals? Like, are you a gum person? Is it a certain type of coffee? What do you have? Like, what is your game day ritual?
I don't drink coffee. I
Okay.
feel like the good Lord gave me plenty of energy, Chase. So I wake up ready to get to it, honestly.
How early are we talking here? Are you getting up?
Now, not early, no. But I'm saying once we're rolling out of bed, hit the ground running. I'm not a morning person, but I definitely wake up with enough energy. I don't really have any game day rituals. I'll tell you this. Those first couple of years as a head coach, I was superstitious, this and this. I got to put my left leg in first. I got to do all this stuff. And man, I've just gone so far. I'm almost at the other side of the spectrum where I just try not to be superstitious because it's like it tricks me. It's like it plays with my mind. I hate it, honestly. But really, it kind of starts for me after school ends because I know that part of my Friday is pretty much, sectioned off. I know we're going to go, pregame meal, we're going to do this. I always like to take another glance at my play sheet to kind of make sure, just kind of get back in that mode of, okay, hey, 1st and 10, third down, 3rd and -5, whatever. And then I really like chill. So when the guys are in the locker room and sometimes getting a little loud, I always try to go in there. I do it because I don't want the assistant coaches to have to do it. Go in there and I'm just like, hey, want you to enjoy this, want you to have a good time, but now's not the time to be bouncing off the wall. Like if you want to play music and you want to nod your head a little bit, that's fine. If you want to turn some film on here in the team room, that's fine. But like it's not gonna be a party. So I like the mellow. I want each kid to be able to get ready in his own way, but I like it when it's really mellow leading up to kickoff.
I love it. Coach Long, how do the good folks support the Fulton Falcons this spring and summer?
You said, how can they?
Yeah, how can they support the Fulton Falcons this spring and summer?
A lot of ways, man. You can, we're always looking for people to jump in with sponsorships. We're hoping to have a nice program this year. So if anybody wants their business, involved in the program, let us know. We always have fence signs. We're always looking for people to come talk to our guys and really talk about the importance of making good decisions and being good dudes. In any way possible, we welcome everybody.
One of the best venues too. The Fulton Stadium it's a great venue. It's one of my favorite in Knoxville, Tennessee. So for the good folks who have not made it over and seen Justin Long, everything he's got cooking with the Falcons, it's a great venue. Yeah,
we've got an underrated view of the mountains, man.
Yep.
Like mountain person, come see us on a nice sunny day. You'll be able to see the great Smoky Mountains. We can even take a picture with the mountains in the background.
Well, hold on. And Coach Long's not going with you. He's going to Texas. Like, don't let it get twisted. The mountains don't move Coach Long. He's more into the stadiums here in Texas. That's more of his deal.
Let's go to Texas A&M. Listen, we got to go see them before they get out of Adidas,
That's great, man. Brand loyalty, Justin Long, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate the time, and we'll have to check back in again soon.
I appreciate you, Chase.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.